So friends, as you know, this is a 18th COVID-19 update that I would be taking you through. And the therapeutic armamentarium I would cover is the newer medications that are currently available, which is steroids, which has made some sort of a waves in our intensive care circle, and the newer antivirals. So friends, most of the intensive care trainees you would acknowledge that steroids has not been something which is new to us. We have been using it from very long time, almost 2 decades. There has been usage of steroids in various types of ARDS. So it has only come and gone few times. So we will try to see what is the newer evidence that has come, and we will try to draw to light about all the previous evidence that was prevailing. And we have been using steroids. There's nothing absolutely new about role of steroids in ARDS, but it is good to revisit the evidence that is currently available and what is its role in the COVID situation. So I think the whole news was made by this recovery trial, and I'm sure many of you would have read this 2-page sort of a narrative that came as an interim analysis. But yesterday we got a full text of this role of dexamethasone in ARDS. So this particular recovery study has around 6 arms to it. So this particular study enrolled 11,500 patients with 175 hospitals. So this is a big sort of a multicentric randomized controlled trial. So as I mentioned, it was a 6-armed study. So the arms that they're looking into was lopinavir, ritonavir, dexamethasone, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, tocilizumab, and plasma, convalescent plasma. So it is a large study involving multiple arms comparing each other to see what really confers good benefit with regards to outcome in COVID-19. And friends, most of you would be aware that HCQ was stopped. The HCQ arm was stopped because of the debate that raised because of that Lancet paper, which showed a lot of side effects. So anyway, that is, we leave it to that debate. So right now our whole interest is in all these other drugs which are still being compared, and the trial is ongoing. So the interim report that came, it basically looked into 6,425 patients which were enrolled to compare dexamethasone with the usual care. So the usual care group, as you see, had 4,321 patients. And when they looked at the mortality, 28-day mortality in the usual care group, the mortality was 41% in mechanically ventilated patients and 25% in the patients who are receiving oxygen, and 13% in patients who are not receiving any of these oxygen support devices. So the thing we need to note is the increased mortality, especially mechanically ventilated and those needing oxygen. So here in this particular recovery study, they used dexamethasone 6 milligram once a day for 10 days. And they used it in 2,104 patients. And this was compared with the usual care group. And what results they found was very, was very impressive. So in this day and age, to show a good mortality benefit is something which is extremely difficult. So here they saw in mechanically ventilated patient, there was 17% reduction in the mortality, and that was statistically significant. So there was reduction in 1/3 of the deaths. And in the group which were receiving oxygen, there was a 1/5 reduction in the death rates. But in the group who was not receiving any oxygen or any oxygen support devices, there was no difference. So it goes to show this steroid seemed to have benefit in sicker patients who are mechanically ventilated or who are on oxygen, and which is what, as intensive care community, we are all interested in, to save lives, because COVID 80 to 85% can be asymptomatic. So what we are really worried is that 5% who come to ICU, and this study throws light on that spectrum of these patients. And the study also looks into number needed to treat, and then they looked at the number. So if you treat 8 patients with dexamethasone, 1 life can be saved, and treatment of 25 patients who are on oxygen will lead to 1 life that is saved. So this was the essence of this study. And the full paper, it came only yesterday. So the full text of the paper. So this was the table that we could collate from that manuscript. So they looked at 28-day mortality in dexamethasone. As I said, it was 21.6%, and the usual care, it was 24.6%. That was statistically significant. And the secondary outcomes, they looked at the discharge from hospital, and even that was found to be significant. The patients who are on dexamethasone were more likely to be discharged than the usual care, and that was also significant. So 64.6% versus 61.1%. And interestingly, the need for mechanical ventilation also was significantly less. As you see, the need for ventilation and death was of 23.9 versus 25.8. And the need for ventilation was 5.2% versus 7.1% in the usual care. And all those were statistically significant. So it's a pretty impressive sort of a numbers and impressive study where dexamethasone really made inroads and showed benefit with regards to the 28-day mortality, the need for mechanical ventilation, and it facilitated discharges. So that was something very striking in this particular study. And when you look at, if you see this diamond, it moves to the left for all the sick patients who needed oxygen and who needed mechanical ventilation. And that was all statistically significant. So that was the study. So obviously we could raise some apprehension about this particular study with regards to there was not a huge difference, but although as we see it was powered to look into these 28-day mortality. But just before this study, so there was another big study, which is the largest randomized controlled trial that came looking at the role of dexamethasone in ARDS. So this is what created a lot of excitement for our intensivists. So this was a big study which came from the Spanish group, dexamethasone treatment for the acute respiratory distress syndrome, a multi-center randomized control trial. So this came by Villar group. It came on March 2020. So this was a multicentric randomized control trial looking into 17 ICUs. So here they took patients with moderate to severe ARDS where PaO2 FiO2 was less than or equal to 200. And these were sick patients. As you see, PaO2 FiO2 was less than 200 with FiO2 more than 50% and PEEP more than 10. So it is not like a very Mickey Mouse patients. So they were really sick patients where they have used dexamethasone. And they enrolled the patient once they reached such alarming levels within 24 hours, they included for randomization. And the interventions here, as you see, if you see the recovery trial, they gave 6 milligram dexamethasone. So here they give a much higher dose. So dexamethasone, they gave 20 milligram once a day. So as you know, the conversion is 0.75 milligram dexamethasone is equal to 4 milligram methylprednisolone. For Indians, where we are using methylprednisolone for our COVID patients, it equates to around 106 milligram of methylprednisolone. So they gave 20 milligram dexamethasone from day 1 to day 5. And after that, they weaned it to 10 milligram once a day. And they continued for 10 days. So basically, the treatment was given for 10 days. And if you want a conversion of methylprednisolone, around 106 milligram followed by 53 milligram, they gave it for these patients. And the primary outcome, they looked at 28-day ventilatory free days. And the secondary outcome, they looked at 60-day mortality. So what were the results? So they had 277 patients. As I said, this is the largest randomized controlled trial in ARDS where steroids was looked into. So that is the merit that you need to give to this study. So 139 patients were there in dexamethasone group and 138 were there in the control group. And ventilatory free days was more in dexamethasone, which is a good thing. So the more the free days, better it is. And that was statistically significant. And look at the 60-day mortality. 60-day mortality was significantly less in dexamethasone group as compared to the control group. 21% versus 36%, and that was statistically significant. And obviously, some of the Puritans would still argue that dexamethasone may lead to increased risk of infections. And you will see the narrative of the studies that I'll show. None of the studies have shown that at the dose that is being used for ARDS in these studies and vouching with the evidence, there is no increased risk of infection with these sort of doses. But hyperglycemia was a problem, but it was not statistically significant. And as you see, the newer infections was the same between the two groups. So although some might argue that giving steroids would increase the risk of infection, but in these carefully monitored dose that we give as an infusion, the studies have shown time and again it does not lead to increase in the risk of infection. That is something we need to keep in back of mind. And interestingly, the Spanish trial also showed that the need for prone ventilation in dexamethasone group was significantly less, which means obviously, see, they were on a tip-off point where they had gone to PEEP of 10 and FiO2 of 50. So had they worsened, obviously one would have thought of proning, but the proning was minimized by use of dexamethasone, 20% versus 30%, and that was also statistically significant. And when they looked at SOFA score was lower at day 3, which is also good. And they looked at PaO2, FiO2 improvement. It started creeping up, and it was higher at day 6. So these were all the positive findings from this particular Spanish study, which I think this Spanish study, along with this recovery trial, uh, given a very strong signal to our intensive community about the role of steroids and its immense benefit for its usage in COVID-19 patients. And this is a Kaplan-Meier curve. As you would see, the survival was much better with dexamethasone group. So in the discussions, the authors say, how did dexamethasone help in ARDS? Obviously, we know it reduces the inflammation within the lung, and it significantly improved all the inflammatory cascade that happens at the alveolar level, and all the inflammatory exudates that get poured into alveoli. All that was negated, is what the authors mention. And they did a subgroup analysis to look at how about the death due to multi-organ failure. Even they found that death due to multi-organ failure was significantly less in dexamethasone group as compared to the control group, and that was also statistics. So basically, you got significance in mortality, got significance with regards to the SOFA score and the need for prone ventilation. So I think this was a very strong signal that this study came out. And as I mentioned, the strength of this study was it was a largest randomized controlled trial. So I don't think there's any trial that is as large as 277 ARDS, sick ARDS patients who are mechanically ventilated. And they looked at whether all biases were eliminated. So they found there was no bias in this study. There was no selection bias. There was no performance bias. There was no attrition bias, and there was no reporting bias. So these are all the strengths of this particular Spanish study that came about. So these are the two strong studies, recovery and the Spanish study by Vicar et al., which really sent out a strong signal. Yes, I think in ARDS, we should be considering usage of dexamethasone. But as I said, the steroids have been there in our armamentarium for the use in ARDS for more than 2 decades. And the first landmark trial that which we are still looking up to is this particular trial, because I want to cover the whole steroids in ARDS in this narrative so that you go with absolute conviction that should we use steroids in COVID-19 ARDS or not. So the first study, landmark study, came from this Meduri et al., Umberto Meduri. This came in 2007. So almost 15 years back. So here they looked at methylprednisolone infusion in early severe ARDS, randomized controlled trial. This was a randomized controlled trial, 5 hospital ICUs in US. They took 91 patients with ARDS, and methylprednisolone was used within 72 hours of ARDS onset. And 66% of these patients were having sepsis. The primary endpoint they looked at was reduction in the single point lung injury score and extubation at 7 days. So what was the results in this Meduri's trial? So they had 91 patients, 63 in the methylprednisolone group. Here they gave methylprednisolone as 1 milligram per kg per day as an infusion for 28 days, and they compared with placebo. So there was a reduction in the lung injury score by 1 point more significantly. Basically, the lung inflammatory index that they looked into was significantly lessened in methylprednisolone group as compared to the placebo. 69.8% of the patients had reduction in the lung injury score, and more patients were successfully extubated. 53.9% were successfully extubated as compared to 25% in placebo group. And even mortality was significantly less in this Meduri's trial, 20.6 versus 42.9, statistically significant. And ICU length of stay also was lower. And duration of mechanical ventilation was lower. And as you see, time and again, every steroid study in ARDS has shown the risk of infection was not high. And this Meduri's trial even showed that risk of infection was less when compared to the placebo. And the CRP also was lower, because we understand in COVID patients, CRP is very high and indicates cytokine storm. So CRP was lower, and day 7 lung injury score and MODS also was significantly less. So all the endpoints that they looked into had significantly better outcome in methylprednisolone group. And after this Meduri's trial came the ARDSNet group, which we all consider it as a Bible for ARDS management. That group came out with this another study of role of corticosteroids in NEJM. Until the Spanish trial came, this was the largest study to look at the role of corticosteroids in ARDS. This was done by the ARDSNet group itself. So this was a randomized controlled trial. So they looked at primary endpoint as 60-day mortality, and the secondary endpoints, they looked at ventilatory free days and organ failure free days. And they had 180 patients, because consider this Spanish study which had 277 patients. So that's why we say it's the largest study. So 180 patients, 89 in methylprednisolone group and 91 in the placebo group. Here, look at the dose they have used. So the dose they have used is a little similar to the Spanish study. If you equate the dexamethasone, 2 milligram per kg they gave as a bolus, followed by 2 milligram per kg as an infusion for 14 days. So here they have divided into 4 doses, 0.5 mg per kg 6 hourly, which literally comes to 2 milligram per kg. They gave for 14 days. So if it is a 60 kg person, they gave 120 milligram as an infusion for 14 days, and they reduced it to 1 milligram per kg for 7 days, and they tapered over days. So this is the dose that they gave in this ArtsNet group. And what were the results? 180 patients, 89 in the early methylprednisolone group. So here, interestingly, this group, they divided ARDS into the early ARDS and late ARDS, and they stratified the study and the administration of methylprednisolone in these groups. So they looked into the results where methylprednisolone was given in early onset ARDS as one arm. The second arm was the one where they looked at role of methylprednisolone when they gave steroids late after the onset of ARDS. So early methylprednisolone usage was when the onset of ARDS was within 13 days, 7 to 13 days. 89 patients were there, placebo 91. So 60-day mortality, there was no difference in the methylprednisolone. It did not achieve statistical significance. They looked at 180-day mortality. There was no difference between early methylprednisolone and placebo. But the study indicated that if you give steroids late after 14 days, the 60-day and 180-day mortality significantly increased. I think this is the practice that we have been following, at least in my unit or in our units, that if it is early ARDS, we have a lower threshold to start steroids. But if they come late in the ARDS, we don't start steroids based on this particular ArtsNet study where it showed increased mortality. And they looked at mechanical ventilation organ failure free days that was high in late methylprednisolone. Again, here you see the risk of infection. Either you start early or late in the type of dosages that is evidenced from these articles. There was no increased risk of infection. So one thing that is very clear is it does not do harm in increasing the risk of infection, if that is the fear anyone would be having. So these are the 4 studies for role of steroids. And now, what do we conclude from these 4 studies? So now you have a recovery trial which says it is beneficial. You have a Spanish trial which says it's beneficial. Then you have Meduris trial which says it's beneficial. But this ArtsNet study debunked that and said it may not be. But this is an old study. Then this meta-analysis came, which hopefully will give us a sort of a convincing substantiation that yes, steroids are here to stay. So this was a good meta-analysis which came in 2009. Which took in all the 6 studies. So basically here it took all the studies which used methylprednisolone 0.5 to 2 point. It took 5 cohort studies and 4 randomized controlled trials. When independently cohort studies was analyzed, it did not achieve statistical significance. Independently when RCTs were analyzed, it did not. But when they combined together and did meta-regression analysis, it achieved statistical significance in reducing the mortality. So this is the forest plot as you would see. So when you only took cohort studies, it did not achieve. But when you combine all the studies, it did achieve statistical significance in reducing mortality. The use of steroids did reduce mortality significantly. And even it did reduce the need for mechanical ventilation with the use of steroids. As you see, the diamond is clearly pushed to the left and favoring the treatment. And even the MODS score, multi-organ dysfunction, significantly was lesser in patients who got steroids. So all in all, as you see, the steroids are here to stay. So now we have a good evidence, at least from the Spanish study, if not for the recovery trial, Spanish study together with the recovery trial, with Meduris trial, along with these meta-analysis, we have a strong signal that it does not cause harm. If at all the studies have shown it increases the risk of glycemia, but infection risk, absolutely not in the dosage we use. So I think we are reasonably justified in considering usage of steroids at this point of time, considering and collating all the current evidence and collating all the previous available good quality studies in ARDS. So we'll move to the remdesivir because I said this talk is on steroids and the newer antivirals. I'll cover remdesivir briefly. So remdesivir, which is now come which will be available in our markets, which will possibly be included as part of our protocol, is a prodrug. And prodrug, it leads to ATP analog. And this remdesivir came into limelight in 2014, where it was used mainly for Ebola virus. But if the question is whether was it successful in Ebola, it had a very, very low efficacy against Ebola. It did not possibly made a huge difference in Ebola. In 2017, this remdesivir was touted and was found out to be effective against coronavirus. As we know, there are different coronavirus, SARS coronavirus. So that hypothesis was applied to this COVID-19. And generally, it has been postulated that remdesivir is effective against single-stranded RNA viruses. And it does have effect on certain key enzymes of SARS-CoV-2. So is what has been hypothesized, and then this was incorporated as part of the trials, which we will look into. And the main mechanism of action, how remdesivir works, is it stops viral replication. So how does it act? How does remdesivir act? So as you know, the coronavirus has a lot of these spike proteins, and if you consider this as a cell membrane, it binds to the ACE2 receptors, which is present on the cell membrane. And there is endocytosis that happens of this virus into these lysosomes, and they get incorporated in these endolysosomes. And then once within the cell, this virus releases RNA. So it releases the RNA that is present within the virus. And this viral RNA starts replicating. And this replication is mediated by this RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. So this is a ribosome, which helps in replication of these and makes multiple copies of this viral RNA. And once the multiple copies are formed, these copies are sort of assembled to form a new virus, and this new virus exits the cells. It will destroy the cells, and they'll all come out and starts harming the body. So this is pretty much how the COVID-19 typically behaves in a human being. So how does remdesivir act? So remdesivir, as we know, it's a prodrug. It is not an active drug in its form. Once it is given, once it is administered, the active form is this, whatever numerical coding they have given, GS441524. This is an active component. So this active component, what it does is it gets embedded into the RNA. So whatever RNA sequencing is formed, it gets embedded. Because it gets embedded, it prevents the further incorporation of nucleotides and prevents the completion of the RNA transcription that happens. So this is a typical way where it obstructs the formation of multiple copies of RNA, because the nucleotides cannot sort of sequence themselves to form multiple copies. But having said that, the virus is very clever. It produces something called 3,5-exoribonuclease, which can deactivate this sort of a remdesivir. So that is something which we need to keep in mind, that it is not still a Brahmastra, but this is the way it pretty much acts. I'll just show you a nice video that will show you the mechanism of action of remdesivir. Very nice video. It is present on YouTube.
नोज से जाता है ना ये?
I think can someone put on
अलायंस करके है, उसको मैंने उसको लॉगिन किया था, मैंने अभी बनाया था, इसने काफी ये बताया।
Can we stop the background voice? Yeah, so I think that cartoon pretty much tells you how remdesivir gets attached to the RNA sequencing and prevents further incorporation of the nucleotides. So I don't know whether you got the audio well, because there's a good audio. You can check it on the YouTube. So what's the pharmacology of remdesivir? It's 200 mg once a day as a IV infusion, followed by 100 mg once a day for 9 days. And absorption, it is found that when you give it as 10 milligram per kg, it gets absorbed into the eyes and CSF and to the testes within 4 hours. Adverse effects, it can cause nausea, vomiting, and predominantly rising in the AST and ALT, or transaminitis is the side effect. So let's look into whether remdesivir has any hope in COVID situation patients. So this was the first study that came on remdesivir. This was a randomized controlled trial that came from Chinese authors. This was published in Lancet on 16th May 2020. It's a double-blind, multicentric, randomized controlled trial. So they took patients with symptom onset less than or equal to 12 days for enrollment, which means they took this patient little early on when they had symptoms. I think the key essence of using any of these antiviral drugs is to use it early when the viral replication is happening. they took the patients with saturation less than 94, which means they're all symptomatic and the oxygenation is affected, with PaO2, FiO2 less than 300 with radiological changes. So the dosage they gave was 200 mg once a day, followed by 100 mg once a day for 9 days. And concomitantly, there was a usage of lopinavir, ritonavir, interferon, and corticosteroids. So the primary endpoint was to look at time to clinical improvement at day 28. So this was the endpoint that they looked at. And they looked at this clinical improvement on a scale of 6. So 1 was very bad, where they discharged and improved, and 6 was death. So that was the clinical scoring they gave. So what was the results? 237 patients, 158 in the remdesivir group, 79 in the placebo group. The time to clinical improvement, there was no difference between the remdesivir and placebo group. But in the subgroup where they looked at the patient where symptom onset was less than 10 days, they found there was a faster recovery time, and that was statistically significant. And adverse events, as you see, there was not much difference between remdesivir and the control group. So this was the study which did not show a huge, this was not powered to look at the mortality. So they just looked at the symptom improvement. So the whole essence of the study is if you use remdesivir where symptom onset is less than 10 days, there is a faster recovery time with remdesivir when compared to the placebo. That's all it showed. And then this was the second paper that came in NEJM by Grain et al. On 10th April 2020. 53 patients were looked into. This was a cohort study. This was not a randomized controlled trial. Saturation less than 94%. So this was a multicentric trial. 22 patients from US, 22 from Europe, and 9 from Japan. So 57% of these patients were mechanically ventilated, and 8% of these patients were on ECMO. So what did they find? Improvement in oxygen happened in significant proportion of patients, 68%, and 57% were successfully extubated. And patients on mechanical ventilator, mortality was reduced. It was 18%. As you saw in the previous studies, mortality can be anywhere hovering around 40 to 50%. So mortality was less, and mortality in non-mechanical ventilator also significantly less. And discharge, 47% were successfully discharged, and death rates was 13%. It was just a cohort study looking into the effect of remdesivir in these patients. And they found that this is a drug which could be used for which should be obviously tested in a larger randomized controlled trial to make logical conclusion. Then this particular trial came on 27th May 2020 in NEJM, where they compared remdesivir usage in 5 days for 5 days and 10 days and saw what was its effect. So this study was supported by Gilead, which makes remdesivir. This was a randomized controlled trial. So they took patients. So all the remdesivir trials took patients who needed oxygen. So that is something all the listeners should keep in mind, not to be used in an asymptomatic patients who are not on oxygen. And the study looked at patients who had radiological changes of COVID. And they looked, primary endpoint, they looked at day 14 clinical improvement. Again, like a previous study, on the scale of 7 they took. So here they had 237 patients, 200 in remdesivir group, 197. So day 14 clinical improvement by 2 points was more in remdesivir group than the control group, not statistically significant. And it appeared, the trend appeared like more patients were discharged, not statistically significant between the remdesivir and control group. And discharge of the patients with symptoms within 10 days. Again, like the previous study, if patients are included in the study within 10 days, the Chinese study we showed that discharge was much better. 62% were discharged as compared to the control group. And mortality, although the signal is towards maybe it may lessen, but it did not show statistical significance with regards to mortality difference. And duration of recovery also, there was no statistically significant. This study basically showed only signals or trend that it may lessen, but only, again, the effect was more pronounced in patients where remdesivir was administered within 10 days of onset of symptoms, and it echoes the same sort of findings that came out from the Chinese trial. And they did a post hoc analysis. This is very important. And what they found is they compared between the remdesivir 5 days and 10 days. And when you look at the 5 days and 10 days group, the patients who are mechanically ventilated, day 14 deaths was more in the group where remdesivir was given for 5 days as compared to the group where remdesivir was given for 10 days. So basically what it shows is in patients who are very sick or mechanically ventilated, it sends out a signal that maybe remdesivir has to be used for a longer time because it showed reduced in mortality. But this was a post-hoc analysis. But in non-invasive ventilation and the HFNO, the day 14 deaths, either you give for 5 days or 10 days, it did not show any difference. So this particular randomized control trial really looked into 5 days of remdesivir versus 10 days. So if you compare in a non-sick patients who are not on ventilator, 5 days appears good enough from the previous table. As you see, 5 days is good enough with regards to achieving your endpoints. But when you have a sicker patients on mechanical ventilator, so this particular table you see, so there were 40 patients who sort of a 40% who died, as opposed to the 17% who died when remdesivir was given for 10 days. So that had a statistical significance. It just sends out a signal. If it is a sicker patient, maybe you have to consider giving it for 10 days. And the adverse effects they reported, 9% had nausea, vomiting, 7% had transaminitis, and 8% had worsening respiratory failure, and 7% had sort of a constipation. So these were sort of effectively all the side effects that they witnessed. So I'll just end with a couple of slides. Favipiravir. So these are some of the small studies that has come. So this was a Russian study. Again, favipiravir showed that the duration of symptoms can be minimized. This was a Russian study which showed duration of symptoms to be reduced as compared with the other group, with the placebo group. And this was a study from Japan. Again, it showed clinical improvement with favipiravir up to 88% by day 14 of treatment. And this was a Chinese study where they showed significant improvement in the radiological imaging with the use of favipiravir. And Chinese study where again it showed superiority to umifenovir. So these are some of the small studies where they have basically looked at favipiravir for mild to moderate symptomatic patients, and they found earlier symptom resolution and better radiological clearance. So they all said rapid reduction in viral loads, faster fever resolution, faster resolution of CT images, and faster clinical improvement. So the role of favipiravir is mainly to start early is a key in COVID virus, because as you see in the early part of the disease, there is a huge viral replication, and the body's immune response is not overwhelming as it would be in the later phase. But if you do not tackle this viral replication, then you have this very turbulent and stormy sort of a immune response, which leads to all the organ dysfunction. Our whole effort is to subdue this viral replication so that we do not lead to this violent, turbulent immune response, which leads to organ dysfunction and death in the later stage. So the dosage of favipiravir that is recommended is 1800 milligram twice a day on day 1, followed by 800 milligram twice a day for 13 days. So the total duration of treatment is for 14 days. And now it is made available by the pharma companies in India. So this is something you could look for. And the mechanism of action of favipiravir is very similar to remdesivir. The active component is ribofuranosyl triphosphate, which again enters the cell and prevents the replication of the viruses by inhibiting RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. It's very similar to the remdesivir. So just I'll end with the last couple of 1 or 2 slides about our experience in Karnataka and how we are doing. So this is the current situation. In India, our case fatality is around 3.28%. And in Karnataka, how are we doing? So if you look at it, see our case fatality rate in Karnataka is 1.54%, and Tamil Nadu has beaten us with case fatality. It is much lesser, and Andhra Pradesh. So since I'm from Karnataka, I'm interested in how our state is doing. Telangana is more than us, and Delhi is 3.45%. So when we look at Karnataka, the 28 districts where we 2 hospitals are doing tele-ICU, our case fatality rate is very less. It's 0.93%, but the city is not doing well because overall in India, cities are what are overwhelmed, and our case fatality rates are high in cities. In Bangalore, it is 4.85. And if you look at our districts, these are the districts where we do rounds for all our COVID patients. So far, we have seen around 3,290 patients over more than 10 weeks. And we had 18 deaths, and the districts that we are covering, case fatality rate is very, very low, 0.54. So I have to upload all the district that we are doing rounds. I think they are the true COVID warriors. I hope someone is logged in. So we're doing exceedingly well in all the districts that we are covering. And if you look at metro cities, Bangalore is not doing great because Ahmedabad is tops the list with case fatality of 7.0, followed by Mumbai, followed by Bangalore. And Chennai, as you see, is doing much better than Bangalore at this point of time with case fatality rate. So thank you very much.